What's going on, movie fans? My name is Michael Weir. I love talking about movies. And in 2004, James Wan and Leigh Whannell got together and created a horror movie that would ignite a horror franchise that we would be talking about almost 20 years later. Now, today we're going to talk about Saw from 2004. And if you're wondering why we're talking about Saw from 2004 today, that is because today kicks off my Saw franchise review series right here on this channel, where I will talk about all 9 previous Saw movies in the Saw franchise leading up to Saw X that comes out on September 29th. Once Saw X comes out, I'll watch and review that movie as well, and then I will cap this series review off with a ranked video where I rank all of the Saw movies from worst to best, in my opinion. But with that said, guys, if this is the first time you're finding my channel, I would invite you to subscribe to my channel because I've got a ton of content on here. Whether you're a huge horror fan, I've done a ton of horror movie reviews there, or just a movie fan in general. I've done a ton of movie reviews that you can check out here on this channel, and I talk about my entire Blu-ray collection back there several times throughout the year when I update it, and I would love for you to check that content out as well. With all that said, let's get into my review for Saw.
The Jigsaw Killer.
Find the path through the razor wire.
Technically speaking, he's not really a murderer. He never killed anyone.
Live or die. Make your choice.
And so, guys, Saw from 2004 is directed by James Wan. It stars Leigh Whannell, and this was the beginning of their creative passion for movies, and it's exciting to watch this movie and then see where those two have gone now, because of course they have both gone on to do bigger and better things, and this was sort of them proving themselves to Hollywood, to the world, that they could make an exciting horror movie, and they really did, in my opinion. You have a movie that's so gritty, so low budget, but it fits the tone and the atmosphere that you don't feel that low budget the entire time. And I really love that about this movie. But before getting into the rest of my likes and my dislikes, let me get into the synopsis for this movie. So the synopsis for this movie is centered around 3 central stories that are going on during this movie. The first one is a pair of detectives led by Danny Glover who are after who they have deemed the Jigsaw Killer, because whoever this Jigsaw Killer is, he captures his victims, puts them in some sort of a torture device, and then forces them to play a game where they have to be willing to give up something of themselves, whether it's a limb, an eyeball cut into someone they love, something along those lines. They have to do that, and if they don't, they die in that trap, and if they die in that trap, he cuts a piece of a jigsaw out of them, showing that they were missing that piece, that will, that want to survive. The next situation you have going on is a home invasion storyline where there's a woman and her daughter who are tied to a bedpost while a man dressed in all black is watching them and watching some monitors. You, the viewer, don't know if this is the Jigsaw Killer or if he's just another pawn in the Jigsaw Killer's game. And the final situation going on in this movie is, of course, the one that everybody knows about. It's 2 men waking up in a industrial bathroom that's in the sewers, and these 2 men, one is played by Leigh Whannell, and he is playing a character called Adam. He's a freelance photographer, sort of private investigator, real shady business that he runs, but he wakes up and he's chained to one end of the room, and on the other end of the room you have a doctor played by Cary Elwes, Dr. Gordon, and he is chained to the other side of the room, and in between them is a dead man who has a revolver in one hand and a tape recorder in the other hand. Now, once they're able to retrieve that tape recorder, there's a voice on the recorder that tells them it wants to play a game, and that game is for Adam to simply stay alive to a certain time of day, while Dr. Gordon must find a way to kill Adam. There's not really much more told to them at that time. They find clues, and you, the viewer, understand things better as the movie progresses. Now, if that sounds like a cool setup to you, and I know it does because that is a really cool setup, and you haven't seen Saw from 2004, I highly recommend this movie to you because it is a fantastic kickoff to the Saw franchise. But getting into my likes, the first like I have for this movie is going to be Billy the Puppet. You don't think of Saw without immediately thinking of that terrifying puppet that goes around on a little bicycle and wants to play a game with you. So Billy has really become synonymous with the Saw franchise. In fact, my wife, who has a whole leg tattooed in horror icons, has Billy the Puppet on her leg because he's just so iconic. Second like I have for this movie has to be Tobin Bell. We have to throw it to him because he does a fantastic job playing the Jigsaw Killer. His voice is so iconic that even movies in this franchise later, after he is established and very dead, you still hear his voice because it's so iconic. And there are different killers throughout this franchise who take up the mantle of Saw, but none of them are able to bring that voice that Tobin Bell had. And it just goes to show how important Tobin Bell is to the series, that all the way up to Saw X, they're now reverting to when he was still alive because they need Tobin Bell because he is Jigsaw. Now, it wouldn't be a Saw review without me talking about that Saw theme song. You guys know what I'm talking about. I can't play it here on YouTube because I will immediately get copyright struck, but you know the song that I'm talking about. It plays at the end of all these movies when everything's going down, when the gigantic twist is happening. Yeah, that song. When it happens, oh, you're just excited. You'll know you love hearing that song because something's about to go down. And finally, my last like for this movie is going to be the torture aspect done right. And what I mean by that is that if you've seen movies like Hostel Part 1, 2, or 3, those are torture movies for the sake of torture. Or if you've seen movies like Terrifier, those are gore for the sake of gore, and there's not much plot around them. But Saw managed to give you a ton of gore, a ton of torture, an uneasy amount of both of those things, while still giving you a fantastic plot all the way around, and you just go along with it. It doesn't take you out of the movie. When you see someone in a saw trap, you're not like, oh, this scene that I have to get through, which is something I feel in movies that have gore for the sake of gore or torture for the sake of torture. Now, I'm not saying that the Saw franchise is like this the entire way, but today we're just reviewing Saw 1. And since that's the movie we're talking about, I will say that the torture aspect of this movie is mixed into the plot and needed for this plot so well, and it's done so well that I love that about this movie and had to throw it in the like category. Now, for dislikes in this movie, guys, I only have one, and a lot of people talk about this. It's Leigh Whannell and Cary Elwes. They're supposed to be carrying this movie because they're the two men you see the most. They're the men that this whole movie is sort of wrapped around, and both of their acting abilities at this point in time in 2004, they were rough. They really were. Now, Leigh Whannell's gone on to do greater things. Cary Elwes has gone on to do greater things. He was just in Mission Impossible 7, and I thought he was a very convincing sort of government, sort of bad guy, sort of good guy, blurred lines sort of a guy. I thought he did really well in that. But in this movie, their acting was rough. And so there's certain times in the movie where they have to sell certain things, like Leigh Whannell has to sell dying, and it's just the most... If I was watching them and I was just judging whether or not he was really dying, I'd be like, fake. That's fake. Like, it was rough. And so as the viewer and you're watching that movie all these years later, you're like, I know you guys have better performances in you. I know you do. So that's my only real dislike for this movie. And that's not to take away from the rest of the performances in this movie. Like I said, Danny Glover's in this movie. I think he does a great job. He's Danny Glover, so of course he does. Tobin Bell, I think, knocks it out of the fucking park. And there's also several other characters that you will see later on in the franchise that show up and you're like, hey, they're from the first movie. And they were pretty good in the first movie, too. So I like that about this movie. So all of the acting isn't bad. It's just from your two main characters. And that's kind of disappointing because you want your two main characters to act better. Overall, I'll say that Saw is a great movie. It holds up. It stands the test of time. 19 years later, this is one of the strongest movies in the franchise. And in my opinion, it's one of the strongest franchise openers because you have other horror movies that are like, oh, that's iconic because it's Halloween from 1978. And honestly, I put Saw from 2004 in that same category of openers that just set the tone for the franchise. You know exactly what you're going to get the whole time. And that twist ending is fantastic. And I won't get into that twist ending too much here, but I will say that if you haven't seen the movie, don't spoil it for yourself. Just go check out Saw. You will not be disappointed. That twist ending works every single time I watch this movie. I'm like, God damn, I'm blown away by that 19 years later. Like, how did they do that? But with all that said, that's my review for Saw from 2004. Have you seen it? Do you enjoy it as much as I do? Let me know in the comment section down below how you feel about it. And if you want to know what my favorite trap from this movie was, you can go to the ending of this video where I will be talking about which one of these traps was my favorite from Saw 1. Thanks for watching this video, guys. Don't forget to give me a like. It helps the video, it helps the channel, and it helps me right here. See you next time. All right, guys, we got to the end of the first Saw review in this series. Don't forget to hit that like button, but I told you I would tell you what my favorite trap was at the very end of this video, and I wasn't lying, because my favorite trap is the Candlelit Trap. If you've seen the movie, you know which one I'm talking about, but to give a little bit of context to that scene, you've got a guy who wakes up in a room, he's been told, hey, you've been poisoned, and the antidote is inside of a safe, but the combination to that safe is painted all over this wall, and it's a very dark room, and all he has is a candle. But on top of all of that being an annoying situation, he's given a time limit, and he himself is completely greased up in some sort of flammable grease. And so he's using that candle to try and find the letters on the wall. And it gets me every single time when he eventually loses it, drops that candle, and ignites himself and the entire room on fire. It's just really well done. I'm a huge fan of that scene. So that's my favorite trap from Saw 1. But with that said, guys, if you like this review, you can click right there to check out any of my other horror movies that I've talked about on this channel, or click right there to check out any of my 2023 reviews I've done on this channel. Thanks for watching. See you next time.